11-year-old Maya Chen sat unnoticed in seat 32F, clutching her deployed father's aviation manual. When Flight 447's electrical and hydraulic systems failed simultaneously, panicked adults froze, but Maya calmly walked to the cockpit with combat, emergency procedures that would save 147 lives through knowledge her heir, Force pilot father taught her. Before you watch. Full story comment below from Which country are you watching? Don't forget to subscribe. Maya. Chen sat alone in seat 32F, the very last row of Flight 447 to Denver. At 11 years old, she looked tiny against the oversized airplane seat, her legs barely reaching the floor. The flight attendant, Jessica, had checked on her 3 times already, bringing extra cookies and asking if she needed anything. "I'm fine, thank you," Maya said politely each time, her small hands gripping a worn aviation manual that most adults would find too technical to understand. The middle-aged businessman in 32D had offered to switch seats with her earlier. "Wouldn't you rather sit by the window, sweetie?" he'd asked kindly. But Maya had declined. She preferred the aisle seat where she could observe the flight crews, procedures, and listen to the subtle sounds of the aircraft systems. The other passengers occasionally glanced back at her with sympathetic smiles. Poor kid, they thought, flying alone while her parents are probably divorced or working. They saw her reading what looked like a children's book about airplanes and assumed she was just fascinated with flying like most kids her age. They had no idea who she really was. Maya wasn't reading a children's book. She was reviewing emergency procedures in a real pilot's handbook that her father, Colonel James Chen, had given her before his deployment to Afghanistan. The pages were filled with his handwritten notes explaining hydraulic systems, electrical failures, and emergency landing procedures. In the margins, he had drawn simple diagrams and added encouraging messages. "You're braver than you know. Little eagle, and knowledge is your superpower." 3 rows ahead, elderly Mrs. Patterson was knitting a scarf for her grandson. She had noticed Maya during boarding and felt a maternal concern for the child traveling alone. "That poor little thing," she had whispered to her husband, Harold. "Flying all by herself. Where are her parents?" If Mrs. Patterson had known that Maya's father was currently piloting dangerous combat missions over Afghanistan, hunting terrorist cells that threatened innocent lives, she might have understood the quiet strength in the young girl's posture. 3 weeks earlier, Peterson Air Force Base, Colorado. "Maya, listen carefully," her father had said during their last weekend together at the airbase. "I'm going to Afghanistan to fight the bad guys who hurt innocent people. While I'm gone, you're going to stay with Aunt Linda in Colorado. But first I want to teach you something important." They had spent hours in his office, surrounded by aviation manuals and flight simulators. Colonel Chen was one of the Air Force's best pilots, specializing in combat missions against terrorist groups in Afghanistan. He flew dangerous operations targeting Taliban leaders and terrorist cells that threatened American forces and Afghan civilians. Maya had tried to be brave during their training sessions, but sometimes her voice would crack when she asked technical questions. "Daddy, what happens if both engines fail at the same time?" Colonel Chen knelt down to meet her eyes, his flight suit still smelling of jet fuel from that morning's training flight. "Then you use your knowledge and stay calm. Every problem has a solution, Maya. Sometimes adults panic because they forget their training, but you have something special. You listen, you learn, and you think clearly under pressure." He showed her photographs of his F-16 Fighting Falcon, explaining how he used it to protect convoys, conduct reconnaissance missions, and eliminate terrorist threats that endangered both military personnel and civilians. "This isn't just a job, sweetheart. When I'm over there, I'm protecting families just like ours. Every mission I fly could save hundreds of innocent lives." "Why do I need to know this, Daddy?" Maya had asked, struggling to understand the complex diagrams of aircraft systems. "Because knowledge is power, sweetheart. And sometimes when adults panic, a calm person with the right knowledge can save everyone, even if that person is small." The night before his deployment, Colonel Chen had tucked Maya into bed and given her a special gift. His personal flight manual, annotated with years of experience and wisdom. "This manual helped me through my toughest missions," he said, placing it in her small hands. "In Afghanistan, when everything goes wrong and lives are at stake, these procedures have saved my squadron and countless civilians. I want you to have it because you're the smartest, bravest person I know. Maya hugged the manual against her chest. Promise me you'll come home safe, Daddy. I promise I'll do everything in my power to come home to you. But I also need you to promise me something. What? Promise me you'll never be afraid to help people, no matter how young you are or how scared others might be. Your mind and your heart are your greatest weapons against fear and chaos, I promise. Daddy. That was the last conversation they had before Colonel Chen deployed to Bagram Air Base, where he would spend the next 8 months flying dangerous missions against terrorist strongholds in some of the most hostile territory on Earth. Now, 6 hours into the flight to Denver, Maya was missing her father terribly. She knew he was somewhere over Afghanistan, probably flying dangerous missions against terrorist strongholds. The thought scared her, but she also felt proud. Her daddy was protecting people who couldn't protect themselves. She opened her father's manual to a page about electrical system redundancies. His handwriting filled the margins. Remember, aircraft have 3 electrical systems for a reason. If one fails, you have backups. In combat, I've flown with 2 systems down. The key is knowing which systems to prioritize. Jessica, the flight attendant, paused by Maya's row during her routine cabin check. At 28 years old, Jessica had been flying for 6 years and had seen thousands of unaccompanied minors. But something about Maya intrigued her. Most children Maya's age would be playing games on tablets or watching movies. Instead, this girl was completely absorbed in what appeared to be a very technical book. That looks like serious reading, Jessica said with a friendly smile. Maya looked up politely. It's my father's flight manual. He's teaching me about aviation. Is your father a pilot? Yes, ma'am. He's in the Air Force. He's deployed to Afghanistan right now fighting terrorists. Jessica's expression softened. She had immense respect for military families, especially children who had to be separated from their parents during deployments. That must be very difficult for you. I miss him a lot, Maya admitted. But I understand why he has to be there. He protects people who can't protect themselves. He says that's the most important job anyone can have. Your father sounds like a hero. Captain Mike Rodriguez was having a routine day in the cockpit of the Boeing 737. His co-pilot, Sarah Martinez, was going through standard procedures as they cruised at 28,000 feet. At 45, Mike had been flying commercial aircraft for 18 years and had accumulated over 15,000 flight hours. Sarah, 32, was a former Navy pilot who had transitioned to civilian aviation after serving on aircraft carriers. The weather was clear, passengers were calm, and they were on schedule to land in Denver in 2 hours. Mike was thinking about his daughter's soccer game that evening, while Sarah was mentally planning her weekend hiking trip in the Rockies. That's when everything went wrong. Mike, look at this, Sarah said, her voice tight with concern. The main electrical panel was showing warning lights that shouldn't be on. What the hell? Mike muttered, scanning the instruments. 3 different warning systems were activating simultaneously. Electrical, hydraulic, and engine monitoring. The aircraft shuddered slightly, and passengers looked around nervously. In the cabin, Mrs. Patterson grabbed her husband's arm. Harold, something's wrong. The businessman in 32D looked up from his laptop, suddenly alert to the unusual sounds coming from the aircraft's systems. Maya felt the vibration through her seat and immediately recognized it from her father's descriptions. She had spent countless hours in flight simulators with Colonel Chen, learning to identify different types of mechanical problems by their sound and feel. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking, Mike announced over the intercom, trying to keep his voice steady. We're experiencing some minor technical issues. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened while we work through our checklist. But it wasn't minor. Within minutes, the situation became critical. The main electrical system failed completely, taking out the autopilot and most navigation equipment. The backup generators kicked in, but they were running on limited power. Then the hydraulic pressure began dropping rapidly, making the aircraft harder to control manually. Sarah, I need you to run the emergency electrical failure checklist, Mike said, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool cockpit air. Already on it, Sarah replied, but her hands were shaking as she flipped through the emergency procedures manual. Mike, this isn't in the book. We've got multiple system failures happening at once. The checklist doesn't cover this combination. The aircraft lurched to the right as Mike fought to maintain control using only manual flight controls. In the passenger cabin, people began to panic. Some were crying, others were praying, and a few were frantically trying to call their families despite the no cell phone announcement. Mrs. Patterson was now openly weeping. "Harold, we're going to crash, aren't we?" Her husband tried to comfort her, but his own fear was evident in his trembling voice. "Everything will be fine, Martha. The pilots know what they're doing." But even Harold could tell that the pilots were struggling. In the galley, Jessica and her fellow flight attendants were trying to maintain order while dealing with their own terror. Jessica had experienced turbulence and minor mechanical issues before, but never anything like this. The aircraft was moving in ways that felt fundamentally wrong. Maya remained calm in the last row, her father's manual open in her lap. She was systematically reading through the sections on multiple system failures, cross-referencing her father's notes with the symptoms she was observing. The aircraft shuddered again, more violently this time. Oxygen masks dropped from the ceiling, causing passengers to scream. But Maya noticed something the adults missed. The cabin pressure was actually stable. The masks had deployed due to an electrical malfunction, not actual decompression. She remembered her father's words. "In an emergency, tell them exactly what you know, not what you think." Maya unbuckled her seatbelt and walked forward. Her father's manual clutched in her small hands. "Honey, you need to sit down," Jessica said, rushing toward her while trying to help other passengers with their oxygen masks. "It's not safe to walk around right now." "The oxygen masks deployed because of the electrical failure, not because we're losing pressure," Maya said calmly. "The cabin pressure is fine, but the pilots have bigger problems." Jessica stared at Maya in amazement. How could an 11-year-old possibly know that? "I need to talk to the pilots," Maya continued. "Sweetie, the pilots are very busy right now. They can't talk to passengers." "Please," Maya insisted. "I think I can help." Jessica looked at this small girl and saw only a scared child. "I know flying can be frightening, but the pilots know what they're doing. Let me get you back to your seat." But Maya didn't move. She opened her aviation manual to a page marked with her father's handwriting. "Ma'am, you have electrical and hydraulic failures happening at the same time." "That's not covered in the standard emergency checklist, but there are backup procedures that can work." Jessica stared at Maya in shock. "How do you know about electrical and hydraulic systems?" "My father taught me. He's Colonel James Chen, and he's a pilot in Afghanistan fighting terrorists. He's faced these same problems in combat when his aircraft was damaged by enemy fire. Please let me talk to the captain." The aircraft shuddered again, more violently this time. Jessica made a decision that would save 147 lives. "Follow me," she said. As they walked toward the cockpit, other passengers stared in disbelief. The businessman in 32D called out, "Where are you taking that child? She should be in her seat." Mrs. Patterson, despite her fear, felt protective of Maya. "Leave her alone." She snapped at the businessman. "Can't you see she's trying to help?" In the cockpit, Captain Rodriguez was running out of options. The aircraft was becoming increasingly difficult to control, and they were still 200 miles from the nearest airport capable of handling an emergency landing. "Mike, we're losing more hydraulic pressure," Sarah reported, her voice tense. "Manual controls are becoming less responsive." "Denver Center, Flight 447, Mike radioed. "We need priority handling for emergency landing. Multiple system failures requesting immediate clearance to Denver International. Flight 447, Denver Center. Understand you're declaring emergency. We're clearing all traffic and standing by emergency vehicles." "What's the nature of your emergency?" "Multiple system failures, electrical and hydraulic. We're running emergency checklists now." But privately, Mike knew they were in serious trouble. Sarah was right. The standard checklists didn't cover this combination of failures. They needed something more comprehensive. "Captain," Jessica's voice came through the intercom. "I have a passenger who says she can help." "Not now, Jess. We're dealing with a crisis here." "Captain, she knows about the electrical and hydraulic failures. She has information that might help." Mike and Sarah exchanged glances. They were trained to consider all options during emergencies, even unusual ones. Sarah had learned in the Navy that sometimes the most valuable intelligence came from unexpected sources. "Send her up," Mike said. Maya entered the cockpit carrying her father's manual. The two pilots looked down at this tiny girl and wondered what Jessica was thinking. "I'm Maya Chen," she said in a clear, steady voice that surprised both pilots. "My father is Colonel James Chen, and he's deployed in Afghanistan with the 455th Air Expeditionary Wing. He taught me about aircraft emergency procedures. Captain Rodriguez had heard of Colonel Chen. He was legendary among military pilots for his skill and bravery in combat operations against terrorist targets. Stories of his heroism were known throughout the aviation community. "Okay, Maya," Mike said gently, his respect for her father lending credibility to the situation. "What do you think you know about our situation?" Maya opened the manual to a page filled with technical diagrams and her father's handwritten notes. "You have simultaneous electrical and hydraulic failures. The standard checklist treats them as separate problems, but when they happen together, you need to use the combat emergency procedures that military pilots learn." Sarah looked at the page Maya was showing them. The procedures were indeed different from their commercial aviation training, more comprehensive and designed for extreme situations. According to this, Maya continued, pointing to specific diagrams, you should switch to the auxiliary power unit immediately. Not wait for the backup generators to fail completely. Then you need to manually engage the emergency hydraulic pump using this sequence. She pointed to a specific series of switches and controls that both pilots recognized, but had never used in this combination. Mike studied the information. It made sense, but it was incredibly advanced for a child to understand. The procedures Maya was describing required a deep understanding of aircraft systems that most commercial pilots never needed to learn. "How do you know this works?" he asked. Maya's voice remained steady, but both pilots could hear the emotion underneath. "Because my daddy used these procedures when his F-16 was hit by enemy fire over Afghanistan. He had to make an emergency landing at Bagram Air Base with no electrical power and failing hydraulics. These steps saved his life and his aircraft." She opened to another page filled with her father's handwriting. "He wrote this after that mission. He said he wanted other pilots to know how to survive when everything goes wrong at once." The aircraft lurched again, and alarms began blaring in the cockpit. "We're running out of time," Sarah said urgently. "Mike, nothing else is working." Captain Rodriguez looked at Maya's serious face and made the decision to trust the knowledge of an 11-year-old girl whose father was risking his life fighting terrorists halfway around the world. "Maya, talk us through it step by step." Maya's small hands pointed to each control as she spoke with calm precision that amazed both pilots. "First, switch to APU power on the electrical panel. That's the red switch on your left, Captain." Mike flipped the switch, and immediately several systems came back online. The constant alarm stopped, and some of the warning lights went out. "That's working," Sarah exclaimed, hope creeping into her voice for the first time since the crisis began. "Now, co-pilot Martinez, you need to manually engage the emergency hydraulic pump. It's the yellow handle above your head, but you have to pull it out first, then push it forward, then turn it clockwise." Sarah followed Maya's instructions exactly. The hydraulic pressure gauge began climbing slowly but steadily. "That's working too," Sarah reported. "Maya, how did you know that sequence? I've never seen it in any commercial manual. My daddy learned it in combat training. He said military pilots need to know how to keep flying when the enemy damages their aircraft. He made me practice the sequence until I could do it with my eyes closed." "Now comes the hard part," Maya said, consulting her father's notes. "You need to reconfigure the flight control system to work with limited hydraulics. Captain, adjust your rudder trim to -2 degrees to compensate for the hydraulic pressure difference." As Mike made the adjustment, the aircraft's erratic movements began to smooth out. For the first time in 20 minutes, he felt like he had proper control of the airplane. "Maya," Mike said with growing respect and amazement, "you're saving all of our lives. How did you learn all this?" Maya's composure cracked slightly, and both pilots could see the young girl underneath the technical knowledge. "My daddy says knowledge is power. He taught me because he wanted me to understand his job. He's fighting bad people in Afghanistan so families like ours can be safe. He said sometimes adults panic, but if you stay calm and use what you know, you can help people." Sarah was now able to restore partial navigation systems using Maya's guidance on power management. "We're getting stable flight controls back," she reported. "Maya, what's next?" Maya continued reading from her father's manual, translating his military terminology into language the civilian pilots could understand. "There's one more thing. With limited electrical power, you need to manually calculate your landing approach. The automatic systems won't work properly." She showed them a handwritten chart her father had created after multiple combat landings under emergency conditions. "This shows how to land safely with partial systems. You come in steeper than normal. Use less flaps and land about 10 miles per hour faster than usual. That's advanced flight test pilot knowledge, Mike said, amazed. Your father taught you this? He said pilots need to know how to land when everything goes wrong. In Afghanistan, his squadron faces emergencies all the time because terrorists try to shoot down American planes with missiles and anti-aircraft guns. He's had to make emergency landings with battle damage more than once. Maya's voice grew quieter. Last month, his wingman was shot down by a terrorist anti-aircraft missile. Daddy had to continue the mission alone to destroy the terrorist camp, even though his own plane was damaged. He said knowledge and training are what separate heroes from victims. Using Maya's knowledge, the pilot successfully contacted Denver International Airport and declared an emergency. The airport immediately cleared all runways and positioned rescue vehicles, but thanks to Maya's help, they wouldn't be needed. Flight 447, this is Denver Tower, came the radio call. We're ready for your emergency landing. Emergency vehicles are in position. Denver Tower, Flight 447. We have restored partial systems and are coming in stable thanks to assistance from a very special passenger. We should be able to make a normal approach. Roger. Flight 447, you're cleared to land runway 34. Right. Wind calm. Visibility unlimited. As the aircraft began its approach to Denver, Maya prepared to return to her seat in the last row. Both pilots were amazed by what they had witnessed. Maya, Captain Rodriguez said, before you go, I want you to know that what you did here today will be remembered forever. You didn't just save lives, you showed us what real courage looks like. Sarah nodded in agreement. Your father would be incredibly proud of you. Maya managed a small smile. I just did what he taught me to do. He always says that helping others is more important than being scared. Jessica accompanied Maya back to her seat, now looking at the small girl with complete amazement and respect. As they walked through the cabin, other passengers had calmed down significantly. The aircraft was flying smoothly again and the panic had subsided. Mrs. Patterson reached out and gently took Maya's hand as she passed. Thank you, sweetheart, she said with tears in her eyes. Whatever you did up there, thank you. The businessman who had been skeptical earlier now looked at Maya with newfound respect. I'm sorry I doubted you, he said quietly. That was incredibly brave. Maya, Jessica said as they reached the last row, you just saved 147 people. How do you feel? I feel proud of my daddy, Maya said simply. He's fighting dangerous people in Afghanistan right now so American families can be safe. He taught me that knowledge and courage can help people, no matter how old you are. The landing was textbook perfect despite the mechanical problems. As the aircraft rolled to a stop, the passengers erupted in applause, not just for the pilots, but for the small girl in the last row who had stayed calm when everyone else panicked. Captain Rodriguez came on the intercom one final time. Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to know that our successful emergency landing was made possible by 11-year-old Maya Chen, whose father is currently serving our country in Afghanistan. She used knowledge he taught her to help us save this aircraft and everyone aboard. The applause grew even louder, and several passengers were openly weeping with relief and gratitude. As passengers deplaned, many stopped to thank Maya personally. She accepted their gratitude gracefully, but kept thinking about her father somewhere over Afghanistan, probably in his F-16 right now, hunting terrorist leaders and protecting innocent people. Mrs. Patterson hugged Maya tightly. You're a hero, little one. Your parents must be so proud. My daddy is deployed, Maya said, but I hope he'll be proud when he finds out. The businessman from 32D knelt down to Maya's eye level. My name is Robert Chen. No relation, but I wanted to thank you and to tell you something. I'm a veteran too. I served in Iraq 10 years ago. What your father is doing in Afghanistan, fighting terrorists and protecting innocent people, is the most important work anyone can do. And what you did today proves that heroism runs in your family. The airport authorities and airline representatives met Maya at the gate, along with local news media who had heard about the emergency landing. But Maya was most excited to see her Aunt Linda waiting for her with tears of pride in her eyes. Maya. Aunt Linda embraced her niece tightly. I heard what happened on the news. Your father is going to be so proud of you. That evening, Maya was staying with her Aunt Linda in Denver when they received a phone call from Colonel Chen. Through a secure military communication line from Bagram Air Base, her father's voice came through clearly despite the thousands of miles between them. Maya, I heard about what happened on your flight. The story has already reached us here in Afghanistan. I'm so proud of you. Daddy, I used everything you taught me just like you said. The pilots listened to me even though I'm just a kid. You're not just a kid, sweetheart. You're my daughter, and you proved today that knowledge and courage don't depend on age. You stayed calm when adults were panicking, and you used what you learned to save lives. That makes you a hero, just like the people I'm fighting alongside here in Afghanistan. Are you safe, Daddy? Are you still fighting the bad guys? Colonel Chen's voice grew serious. I'm safe, and yes, we're still working to stop the terrorists who want to hurt innocent people. Just yesterday, our squadron eliminated a terrorist cell that was planning an attack on a school. But knowing that you're safe and that you can take care of yourself makes my job easier. I can focus on the mission knowing my brave daughter is okay. When are you coming home? Soon, sweetheart. A few more months and then we'll be together again. And when I get back, I'm going to teach you even more about flying. Maybe someday you'll be a pilot too. I want to be just like you. Daddy, I want to help people and keep them safe from bad guys. You already are helping people, Maya. What you did today proved that heroism comes in all sizes. I love you more than all the stars in the sky. The story of Maya Chen's heroic actions spread quickly through news media and social networks. She became known as the little hero of Flight 447, but she always made sure reporters understood that her knowledge came from her father, who was serving in Afghanistan fighting terrorists and protecting innocent lives. The airline offered Maya and her family free flights for life. The pilot sent her a signed photo with the message, "To Maya, our co-pilot and hero, thank you for saving our lives and the lives of 147 passengers. Your courage and knowledge made all the difference." The passengers from Flight 447 created a fund to help military, families like Maya's who were separated during deployments. Mrs. Patterson became a regular correspondent, sending Maya letters and care packages throughout the remainder of her father's deployment. But the recognition Maya treasured most came from her father's squadron in Afghanistan. They sent her an honorary patch with her own call sign, Little Eagle. The message read, "To Maya, Little Eagle Chen. You proved that courage and knowledge know no age limits. Your father fights for freedom here, and you fought for lives there. Both of you are heroes." The 455th Air Expeditionary Wing. 3 months later, Colonel Chen returned home from Afghanistan after successfully completing multiple missions against terrorist targets. His squadron had eliminated several high-value terrorist leaders and disrupted numerous planned attacks against American and coalition forces. He brought with him commendations for valor and a deep satisfaction that his service had made the world safer for families like his own. When Maya ran into her father's arms at the airport homecoming ceremony, she was wearing her Little Eagle patch proudly on her jacket. "Did you really save all those people?" Colonel Chen asked, hugging his daughter tightly. "I used what you taught me, Daddy. Just like you saved people by fighting the bad guys in Afghanistan." "That's right, sweetheart. We both learned that helping others is the most important job anyone can have, whether you're flying combat missions or just being brave when others need help." Maya Chen continued studying aviation throughout her childhood. Inspired by both her father's military service and her own experience saving Flight 447, she eventually became one of the youngest people ever accepted into the Air Force Academy. Following in her father's footsteps with dreams of becoming a pilot who could protect others, but she never forgot the lesson she learned that day at 28,000 feet. That knowledge, courage, and the willingness to help others can turn anyone into a hero, regardless of age or size. Her father's service in Afghanistan continued for several more years, as American forces worked to eliminate terrorist threats and protect both American and Afghan civilians from groups like the Taliban and Al-Qaeda. Colonel Chen flew hundreds of combat missions, always carrying a photo of Maya wearing her Little Eagle patch as a reminder of what they were both fighting for: the safety and freedom of innocent people everywhere. The story of Maya and Flight 447 became legendary in aviation circles, taught in both civilian and military flight training programs as an example of how emergency situations require calm thinking, comprehensive knowledge, and the courage to act when lives are at stake. And somewhere in the last row of every flight she took afterward, Maya Chen would quietly review her aviation manuals, ready to help again if needed. Just as her father had taught her during those precious days before his deployment, to fight for freedom in the skies over Afghanistan. Years later, when Maya became a pilot herself, she would tell her own students the same thing her father had taught her. Knowledge is power, courage comes in all sizes, and the most important mission anyone can have is protecting others when they can't protect themselves. The little girl in the last row had become a legend, proof that heroes aren't defined by age, size, or strength, but by their willingness to use what they know to help others when it matters most.